You don't usually notice the moment your financial life starts taking shape. There's no announcement, no clear turning point. It doesn't feel like a decision that matters. It's more like a series of quiet approvals. You approve a slightly higher rent because the place feels calmer. You approve convenience because your days are already exhausting. You approve small upgrades because, after all, you've earned it. And none of those choices feel irresponsible. In fact, they feel reasonable. That's what makes this so hard to see. Because years later, when things feel tighter than they should, when your income has grown, but your freedom hasn't, you look back, trying to find the moment things went wrong. And there isn't one. There are just hundreds of moments that felt completely fine at the time. Most people believe their financial life is shaped by the big decisions, the obvious ones, the job they take, the house they buy, the investment they make. And those things do matter, but not in the way most people think, because those decisions are rare. You might change jobs a few times in a decade. You might make a handful of large financial moves across your life. But what about the other 3,600 days in between? That's where your financial life is actually built, quietly, through repetition, through defaults, through decisions that don't feel important enough to question. Think about something simple. Your daily routine. You wake up, check your phone, get ready, maybe grab coffee on the way to work. None of this feels like a financial strategy, but it is, because every routine carries a cost, not just in money, but in energy, attention, and time. If your mornings are rushed, you're more likely to spend for convenience. If your evenings are draining, you're more likely to spend for relief. And over time, those patterns become predictable. Not because you planned them, but because they fit your life. Now zoom out. Imagine two people earning the same income. On paper, they look identical. Same salary, same city, similar responsibilities. But their lives slowly start to diverge. One of them builds small margins into their life. Nothing extreme. They just leave a little space. They don't optimize everything for comfort. They don't eliminate every inconvenience. They allow for some friction. The other person does the opposite. They remove friction wherever possible. Everything becomes smoother, faster, easier. Food arrives instantly. Bills are automated. Life is streamlined. And again, neither approach is wrong. But over time, the outcomes begin to separate. Not dramatically at first, just subtly. One person has a little more breathing room, the other feels slightly more locked into their lifestyle, and that difference grows. Because here's what often goes unnoticed. Every time you make your life more convenient, you're also making it more expensive to maintain. Not just financially, but psychologically. You get used to a certain level of ease, a certain level of comfort, and once that becomes your normal, going backwards doesn't feel neutral. It feels like losing something, even if, objectively, you're just returning to where you used to be. This is how lifestyle inflation really works. Not as a sudden jump, but as a gradual shift in what feels acceptable, what feels deserved, what feels necessary. And the tricky part is, it doesn't feel like inflation. It feels like progress. Until one day your expenses have quietly risen to match your income, and the space you thought you were creating never really appeared. But this isn't just about spending, it's about direction, because every small decision is a vote for the kind of life you're building, a vote for short-term comfort or long-term flexibility. And most of these votes happen automatically. You don't sit down and think, this decision will shape my future. You just respond. To your environment, to your stress, to your habits. If your job is draining, you'll naturally look for relief. If your environment encourages spending, you'll slowly align with it. If everyone around you is upgrading their lifestyle, it becomes harder not to follow. Not because you lack discipline, but because humans adapt. We absorb what's normal around us, and that becomes our baseline. This is why financial advice often feels disconnected from real life. It focuses on logic, on numbers, on optimization. But most decisions aren't made in a calm, rational state. They're made at the end of a long day, when you're tired, when your attention is low, when you just want things to feel easier. And in those moments, convenience almost always wins. There's also something deeper happening, something emotional, because money is rarely just about money. It's about how you feel in your life. If you feel behind, spending can feel like catching up. If you feel stressed, spending can feel like relief. If you feel uncertain, spending can feel like control. These patterns aren't obvious when they happen. They feel justified, even necessary, but over time, they compound, just like interest. And that's the part most people underestimate. Compounding doesn't only apply to investments, it applies to behavior. Small actions, repeated consistently, create momentum. And that momentum shapes your reality. Let's say you delay looking at your finances, not because you're irresponsible, but because you already have a rough idea and you'd rather not confirm it. That one decision doesn't seem like a big deal, but if it becomes a habit, you slowly lose visibility, and when you lose visibility, you lose control. Not all at once, just gradually. And this is how financial drift happens. Not through big mistakes, but through passive continuation. Through decisions that were never revisited. So what's the turning point? It's not about becoming extremely disciplined overnight or cutting out everything that makes life enjoyable. It's something much quieter. You start noticing, not judging, not overreacting, just noticing. You notice where your money goes, without intention. You notice which decisions feel automatic. You notice the patterns that repeat. And once you see them clearly, you have a choice. That's the shift. From reacting to choosing. From default to direction. Because when you're not aware, your financial life is shaped by everything around you. But when you are aware, even slightly, you start shaping it yourself. And this doesn't require extreme changes. It's not about cutting your spending in half or tracking every dollar obsessively. It's about small adjustments, strategic ones. Maybe you create a little friction in places where spending is too easy, not to punish yourself, but to slow things down, to give yourself a moment to decide. Maybe you build a small buffer, not a perfect safety net, just enough to create breathing room. Because breathing room changes how you think, how you decide, how you respond to stress. Maybe you start aligning your environment with the person you want to become, spending less time in situations that encourage constant consumption, more time in spaces that feel grounded. None of this is dramatic, but it's powerful because it works with your behavior instead of against it. And over time, something interesting happens. You don't feel restricted. You feel clearer, less reactive, less pulled in different directions. Your decisions start to feel lighter, not because they're easier, but because they're intentional. And that's where real progress begins. Not in big leaps, but in quiet consistency. Because the truth is, your financial life is not decided in one moment. It's shaped in thousands of small ones. Moments where you choose convenience or awareness, comfort or flexibility, impulse or intention. And you don't have to get all of those moments right. You just have to get a few more of them right over time. That's enough, because small shifts, repeated consistently, change direction. And direction, over years, changes everything. So if things feel off right now, if you're earning more, but not feeling better, it doesn't mean you failed. It probably just means your decisions have been running on autopilot, like they do for most people. And the solution isn't to panic or to overhaul your entire life. It's to slow down, just a little. To notice the quiet decisions, the ones that don't feel important, the ones that happen every day. Because those are the ones shaping your life, whether you see them or not. And the moment you start seeing them, even slightly, you start taking back control. Not all at once, but enough to change where things are going. And maybe that's the most important part. You don't need perfect control. You just need direction. Because direction over time, is what builds a life that actually feels stable. Not just on paper, but in reality. And that kind of stability doesn't come from one big decision. It comes from hundreds of small ones that finally start working in your favor.